Namaste, Namaskaram, Vanakkam, Namo Namaha. Jai Hindu Yoga Dharma, Jai Maha Ganapati. So here's our third in our video podcast series about decolonization without hatred. So from the British Raj, now we go to sailing out of India. When many people think of colonization, they imagine armies conquering territory, foreign flags raised over distant lands, and political domination imposed through force. Yet, one of the lesser known, perhaps, chapters of the colonial history emerged not only through military conquest, but through labor systems that carried millions of human beings across oceans under contracts that promised opportunity, while often delivering hardship, exploitation, and displacement. After slavery was formally abolished in the British Empire in 1833, plantation economies throughout the empire faced a crisis. Sugar plantations in the Caribbean, Africa, and the Pacific depended upon massive supplies of labor. The end of African slavery created severe labor shortages for colonial plantation owners who still wished to maintain profitable agricultural empires. The solution? The British Empire increasingly turned toward the indentured labor system. Between the 19th and the early 20th centuries, millions of Indians were transported across the world under contracts of indenture. They were to work on plantations and colonial enterprises. Large numbers were sent to Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, Suriname, Fiji, Mauritius, South Africa, and numerous other colonial territories, including Reunion, Jamaica, East Africa, Malaysia, and Burma. Actually around the equator, because that's where the sugar grew. This movement became one of the largest migrations in modern history. Most of the recruits came from impoverished regions of India, suffering already from famine, social instability, created by colonialism, of course, colonial economic disruption, lack of opportunity, indebtedness, and social vulnerability. Recruiters, often known as archatists, traveled through villages promising good wages, land, prosperity, or temporary contracts, followed by return passage home. Many laborers did not fully understand where they were being taken or what they were signing on to. Some believed actually they were traveling within India itself. Others signed documents that they really couldn't read, often with thumbprints rather than written signatures. So often the ruse was to offer them a plot of land with a 99-year lease, or they could get return passage back to India. And actually this hits home to me because obviously I spent a lot of time in Trinidad and throughout the Caribbean, and then my guru lived in Fiji, and his parents were brought there as indentured servants from Tamil Nadu. And I know the stories firsthand from my guru as he told me about the indentured system and much of the cruelty. And one really shocking thing was one time an older Indian woman came to see me, and on her forearm was tattooed a Christian cross. This was shocking. And I said, Ma, how come you wear that Christian cross? She said, well, when we were young, in order to get food, the missionaries told us, oh, well, we need to identify you, so we'll just tattoo this simple symbol on your arm, and all you have to do is show that, and then you will be offered free food. Wow. While we're on that topic, let me tell you about another personal experience. It was when a few other monks in what was then called Madras, now Chennai, and we were standing on the street corner, and across the corner, a school bus stopped. And we stood there and watched for a while, and the driver got out, opened the hood, fiddled around a little bit, went back inside, seemed to not be able to start the bus, came back out, fiddled around again, went back in the bus, and all of a sudden it started. Now, there happened to be an Indian boy watching that on the other side of the street, and he came over to us, and we asked him what was going on there. And he said, well, this was a busload of Indians being taken to a Christian missionary school. And so apparently the driver stalled out the bus, and it stopped, and he went and opened the hood, and I watched him disconnect the spark plug wire. And he went back in the bus, and I went off to the side so I could hear what he was saying. And he said to the children, let's try an experiment here. Let's all pray to one of your gods. How about Shiva? And see if we can get this bus to start. So they all prayed, and obviously nothing happened. So the driver went out again, reconnected the spark plug wire, went back in and said, oh, children, let's try another experiment. Let's try praying to Jesus. Miraculously, what happened? The bus started. So back to the journey across the ocean. That journey itself carried deep psychological and significance. In many traditional Hindu communities, crossing the ocean, sometimes referred to as Kalapani, black waters, was associated with loss of varna, separation from the homeland, and cultural rupture. For countless laborers, leaving India meant entering a world of uncertainty from which many would never return. The conditions awaiting them, though not advertised obviously, were brutal. Indentured labor was not legally identical to slavery, yet many historians have described it as existing within a gray zone between freedom and coercion. Workers signed contracts that they didn't really understand, but the economic desperation and manipulative recruitment practices surrounding those contracts frequently undermine genuine freedom of choice. Plantation life involved harsh physical labor, poor housing, low wages, corporal punishment, restrictions on movement, surveillance, debt dependency, and social isolation. Just like slavery in America, families were frequently separated. Women were especially vulnerable within plantation societies, marked by imbalance between male and female labor populations. Obviously, there was language barriers, unfamiliar environment, and dislocation from traditional community structures. All this intensified the trauma. The plantation system required not only labor but also cultural uprooting. Yet, amazingly, the story of Indian indenture is not solely a story of suffering. It's also a story of survival, resilience, continuity, and cultural reconstruction. Across the Caribbean, the Pacific, Africa, and the Indian Ocean, indentured Indians carried with them fragments of memory, languages, songs, prayers, rituals, epics, deities, festivals, and their sacred traditions. Though separated from India geographically, many communities worked tirelessly to preserve civilizational continuity. A great testament to a resilient nature and a love of the Dharma, because humble as they were, little temples, little siwalas emerged in distant lands. The Ramayana recitations continued. Hindu festivals like Diwali, Pagwa, or Holi, and Kavadi survived across oceans and plantation barracks. Tamil, Telugu, Hindi linguistic traditions persisted across the generations. Sacred fire ceremonies, bhajans, pujas, and family customs became anchors of identity in unfamiliar worlds. It was interesting that in Trinidad, most of the indentured servants came from the north of India, so the Ramayana, Vaishnavism was the primary influence. In fact, when I went there and talked about Murga and Saivism, they knew nothing about that at all. When I showed them Vibhuti, they knew nothing about that at all. Yet, antithetical to that was my trip to Fiji, where most of the indentured servants there came from the south, from Tamil Nadu. And yes, they were all about Murga and Saivism and Vibhuti. So very, very different. So out of all this trauma, a new diasporic Hindu civilization took place. In Trinidad, Guyana, Suriname, Fiji, Mauritius, descendants of indentured laborers eventually became central contributors to national life, political, economic, cultural, academic, and religious spirituality. They flourished. They helped build roads, railways, plantations, agricultural systems, schools. Trinidad has many Hindu schools. And many, many, many little siwalas, and now to this day very large ones also. Over time, these communities developed distinct Indo-Caribbean, Indo-Fijian, Indo-Mauritian, and Indo-African identities. Simultaneously rooted in India, yet transformed through migration and adaptation. Interesting, when you go to Mauritius, you have Indian Hindus speaking French. And of course, many of the Indo-Caribbeans have that typical Caribbean flair in their accent. The indentured system, therefore, reveals another dimension of colonialism. So, in a way, as horrible as it was, there is, in a sense, perhaps a good silver lining here. You have Hindus now that are brought around the world due to that system. So, an interesting phenomena that happened. It is what it is. So colonialism, of course, was not merely about territorial conquest. It was about a global movement and management of labor. Remember, this was about sugar and tea, which the British people loved. And the Indians came to love also. Human beings became units within imperial economic systems. Entire populations were relocated to sustain the plantation economies. After slavery became politically and morally difficult to sustain. Scholars generally referred to the new indentured system as a new system of slavery, while others emphasize important legal distinctions between slavery and indenture. Historically, the reality was really complex. Indentured workers technically possessed contracts and limited legal rights, yet economic desperation, coercive recruitment, harsh working conditions, and restricted freedoms often created exploitative systems that resembled bondage in practice. The deeper colonial pattern becomes clear. Empires sought labor, control, productivity, and profit. Human beings were frequently organized according to the needs of imperial economies. Yet despite these hardships, the descendants of indentured Indians transformed suffering into continuity and renewal. Kudos to them. Their story is not merely one of victimhood. It's a story of endurance. A people removed from their homeland. They carry the memory across the oceans and rebuilt fragments of civilization in entirely new lands. Through mandirs, temples, language, music, cuisine, family structure, religious practices, they preserve connections to ancestral traditions while simultaneously contributing to the societies in which they settled, becoming now among some of the wealthiest. The ships that carried them outward from India were intended to serve the empire. Yet, those same journeys unexpectedly spread Indo-Hindian civilization across the globe. Today, millions of descendants of indentured Indians continue to honor those journeys. Their ancestors crossed oceans under conditions shaped by empire, by exploitation and uncertainty. Yet they also carried with them something colonialism could never erase: the memory of who they were, the memory of the Dharma, that internal spirit, the inviting culture, and the enduring human capacity to rebuild meaning even after displacement, to say the least. The history of indentured, therefore, stands as both a warning and an inspiration. It warns of what happens when economic systems reduce human beings to labor units within imperial structures. Yet it also reveals the extraordinary resilience of communities that preserve identity, dignity, sacred tradition, dharma, despite enormous hardship. Perhaps this is why the story of indentured India matters so deeply today. It should remind us that colonialism was never only political. It was economic, cultural, psychological, and civilizational, and reminds us that even amid displacement and exploitation, severe exploitation, human beings continue to search for roots, meaning, continuity, and freedom. So pranams to all those around the globe who, in a sense, took lemons and made lemonade, who left a great legacy. So do you think colonialism is over? Think again. Join us tomorrow. Namaste. Jai Hindu Yoga Dharma.